Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
Big competition, not on my part, because I didn't care. I'm not a competitive person. I never have been. I'm not competitive. I've always been a team player. You know, when I was a basketball player, it was all about the team. When I've done theater work, it's all about the team and the audience and the playwright. It's never been about me showing everybody how much better I am than everybody else. I've just never been like that. But your father's family is extremely competitive, and I hated playing games with them. There was a moment during that, when we were in Falls Church for that fucking reception, and we were going back, and we stayed at a motel, and we were going back and forth between your dad's family and my family. I think that's when we played a game of Scrabble. Your dad and I were playing Scrabble, and was it Scrabble? No, it wasn't Scrabble. It was oh shoot, what's the one called with the armies? The little tiles that represent bombs and different. I can't remember what it's called. Stratego. Stratego. We were playing Stratego, which was one of my favorite games. I used to love that game. Your dad killed it for me. And pretty much game playing for a long time. I hated games, and I had always been a person who loved playing games because guess what? I wasn't competitive. So if I lost, it didn't matter. It never mattered to me until I started playing games with your dad's family. And then for them, it's like when you play games with his family, it's like playing for your fucking soul. Everybody is out to prove how much better they are than the rest of the family. And if you win, you're the king of everything, and everybody else is a dunce. You know, I mean, that's just literally how they played. It was all cutthroat, and that's, for some reason, they thought that's how you're supposed to play games. I had never played games like that with my friends. My friends loved to play with me because if I lost, I didn't care. I did not care. If I won, I didn't care. It was just a game, right? I didn't lord it over everybody if I won, you know. I just was not that way. And anyway, so we played this game of Stratego. And he had killed everything I had, and he still had all his high-level players, so I was trying to concede. I kept saying, you know, you've won. No, let's keep playing. You've won. Let's keep playing. He finally got to a point where he took my last player. I think I still had bombs on the board. But he just crushed me, and it was so pointless and stupid that I said, okay, fine, and I upended the board. I threw the board up in the air, and his family was shocked. His family was shocked because they thought I was a poor sport. I wasn't a poor sport. I just didn't see the ego trip, and that was my first experience game playing with that family. No, it wasn't, because I had been playing games with his family before.
Right.
That's right. I had forgotten about that. But I mean, that was this moment where it's the first time I'd been playing where I saw that side of his family, because when I was there visiting, they were all on their best behavior. So I didn't see that element when we were playing before. When I was playing with Richard and I saw this side of cutthroat, I'm going to prove that I'm the Ubermensch and you're nothing. That side came out in your father in playing that game. And I told him later we were arguing about it, and I told him I had lost everything. He said, well, I didn't know that. Well, I kept telling you. Why didn't you listen to me when I told you you had won? There was no way I could win the game, and so I just conceded. And at that point, when I first started that, we weren't arguing. It wasn't until later that he just decided to absolutely crush me into the ground, and it became about egos, that I got mad and upended the board. And then later, we were playing something, and Artel said something. I said, well, it's just a game. And he said, well, I'm glad to hear you say that. And I knew exactly where that came from. It was like, okay, whatever. Anyway, but yeah, I just, your father got hired at Exxon, and I was pregnant by then. I think I was like 8 weeks pregnant by then. And your father, the only job offer he got was Exxon. And so he took that job, and we decided, since we didn't get a honeymoon, we drove from Provo to Baton Rouge, and we drove through Mesa and visited his grandfather, who was a fucking racist psycho. I have never in my life heard such a racist son of a bitch as his grandfather. Every other word out of his mouth. And I'm not talking just black people. I'm talking black people, Hispanic people, you name it. He had an ugly word for them.
Is this the one that my great grandmother was so afraid to die and go back to him that she?
No, that was Artel's father. This was Fosha's father.
Oh, right, okay, interesting.
This was Grandpa Black. And it was interesting later on. I remember being in the car with her and Ronald, and they were having an argument over something, and Ronald was being being less racist. He was arguing against something, and your mother was arguing for a racist position on something. I don't remember what it was. And at one point, Fosha said, well, what does Jody think about this? And I was going to be Switzerland. I wasn't going to get in on this. But I was appalled at what she was arguing. I don't even remember what the argument was. And I said, well, I don't have any, I'm not saying anything. And she laughed. She laughed at me not taking, and it wasn't scathing laughter. It was genuine, ha ha ha, that's smart of her. She's not going to get involved in this. But Fosha was bigoted against everybody. She didn't use those words, but she was racist, and she basically looked down on anybody who wasn't LDS. And if you were a convert, you were barely acceptable. You were barely acceptable. Artel told me about an instance when a convert to the church, the Cub Scout troops, and they would take turns bringing treats for the week's meeting. And they had a family of converts, and they brought Coke. Well, your dad's family was one of those families who didn't drink Coke because of the caffeine. They interpreted that as, breaking the word of wisdom. She had a cow over this family bringing Coke, and Artel said, well, they're converts. They don't know any better, so, we have to teach them. And my experience with Artel is he seemed like an easygoing guy. Oh, I didn't tell you about every time your dad's family would get together, and it was a huge family, James had died in a car accident. No, not a car accident, a motorcycle accident on his, when he was in the mission home. The two of them had borrowed a motorcycle and gone out riding, him and his companion, and they don't know who was driving the motorcycle, but one of them was driving, the other was on the back, and they failed to make a turn, which, is, until you know what you're doing on a motorcycle, that's a real danger. The first time Skip took me out on a motorcycle, he told me before we went out, when I lean with me. And instinctively, when you're on the back of a motorcycle, you've never done it before, and you're making like a right turn, your instinct is to turn left because you're afraid of falling, right? Because when you lean into the turn, the bike tips, and it's a little scary if you've never done it before. And first time Skip took me out, I did just that, and he screamed, "Lean with me!" I scared the hell out of him because I leaned the wrong direction. So after that, I would just, wrap my arms around him, and whatever he did, I would do because I was holding on to him. You learn to do that. But these were two inexperienced young men. They'd never been on a motorcycle before, and they were hit by a truck, I think. I don't think it was a bus. I think it was a truck, and they were both killed. But there were 8 people still in that family, and Fosha continued to mourn. She never got over that. She never got over losing James. James had been the favorite in the family. Everybody loved James. And he was the second. David was the eldest, and then James, and then your father, and then Richard became the favorite after James died. But because your grandmother was big on her favorites, when we started having children, oh boy. When we started having children, My children were the favorites at first because you were so well behaved, but then, we had that Christmas where you were like eating bulbs off the Christmas tree. So then Marie's children became the favorite.
I'm pleased that I had that honor. In this case, this is me psychoactively, retroactively causing chaos that was deserved to be had.
She was ridiculous, but she just was petty and childish and completely narrow-minded about pretty much everything, and really angry at the world because she was married to a shithead, although I didn't know that at the time. It wasn't until we went to Israel that I realized what a shithead he was. And then I had a much better understanding of your grandmother Fosha. But anyway, the family would get together, every family, and I hated family reunions. Oh my gosh, I hated them so much. And they would sit around and all talk about how much they hated Artel. And I couldn't understand that because he seemed like such a nice guy. It's like, boy, if you hate anybody, it should be Fosha, because she's the pain in the ass, not Artel. He's easygoing. Well, the reason he was easygoing is, he was a fucking tyrant who, what he said, he always got his way. And, if he said jump, Fosha and the kids had to jump, No wonder she was so bitter. Anyway, after Marie had that horrible accident before her wedding, it was like the day before her wedding, or the week before her wedding. It was real close to her wedding, and the family was sitting around talking about it. And I think it was your Uncle Donald who said they were talking about him dodging a bullet because the friend had not asked Artel to pay for the snowmobile that had gotten wrecked, and they were all laughing about that and saying, one of them, I think it was Donald, said, yeah, if he had been required to pay for that, he would have called it a double tragedy. Because of Marie getting hurt and the amount of money he had to pay for the snowmobile, but he didn't have to pay for it. But yeah, every family reunion was about sitting around and talking about how horrid Artel was and what a monster he was, which is why it was such a shock for me later when your father started to say things like, my dad was a pretty smart guy, and started acting more like his father. Like I said, I didn't realize it was the church, the leadership of the church coming down and trying to stomp on feminism and other stuff by telling men to take control of their families. And of course, Artel may have been part of that too. I don't know, but your dad turned into his father, and that was the source of all of our problems. I told him I didn't marry your father. The guy I married, he was being somebody he wasn't for me. And later on, he talked about me changing. You changed. Well, you married me when I was 20. I was still growing up. Of course, I changed. And he changed too, because I was pretending to be somebody I wasn't when I married him. I was trying really hard to be somebody I wasn't. I was trying to be what I thought everybody thought I should be. And he was being somebody he wasn't. So we were two people who got married who had no idea who we were and were pretending to be people we weren't. So it's no surprise that the marriage fell apart.
This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, available in many markets, including at Amazon.com. Copyright 2018, Red Anvil Amalgamated, LLC.
To fight the forces of evil!